so much. I see more folks are joining. Welcome.
It's 4 o'clock on my clock, so should we give 2 more minutes or so?
I don't quite have a quorum, so I think I need one or two more to join in. We're
Okay.
getting close.
Norm, did you want to say something? You raised your hand. Oh, and you're
Unmute.
muted.
Oh, okay. Norm.
I was in that section looking. I must have hit it in there. Sorry. I
No
will
worries.
speak later.
Hi, Eric. Glad you could join. Hi, Myra. Hi, Nayeli. Hi, Kayla. Hi, Christina and Sharon and Andrea and Vanessa. See lots of folks. And then Paige, do you want to bring up the, yep, you're working on it. Driving the ship.
I believe we have a quorum now.
Okay, great. So we can move on to the second slide. Note that we have simultaneous translation. Kindly look for that interpretation icon and mute your original audio. So the meeting of the Commission on Racial and Social Equity is called to order today, April 21st, 2021. And we'll proceed with the roll call. Commissioner Edith Arias.
I think she was going to be joining a little bit late.
Okay. Police Chief Jeff Asufardi.
Here.
Commissioner Gladys Balmas.
Here.
Commissioner Norm Faria.
Here.
City Manager Mike Futrell. Commissioner Cheske Basan. Commissioner Vanessa McGovern. Here. Commissioner Hermes Monzon. Trustee Patricia Murray,
Here.
Vice Mayor Mark Nogales,
Here.
Commissioner Kayla Powers,
Here.
Commissioner Liliana Rivera, Commissioner Bobby Vaughn, Commissioner Andrea Fernandez, alternate.
Here.
Thank you. Before we begin our work today, I want to briefly address the Sherwin Verdict. I know we all held our breath until that verdict was rendered in the killing of George Floyd. And it reminds us how far we have come as a nation and how far we still need to go in addressing the issues of racial and social equity in policing and all aspects of governance. While our issues in South San Francisco are not of the scale of other communities, we acknowledge that we have them. We do not live in a vacuum. We are part of this country and it is badly needed of healing. As a commission, we are part of the healing process and we are committed to bringing solutions to this community to improve the quality of life for all who call South San Francisco home. Black Lives Matter. We are continuing our work in phase 2, and today we will look into housing insecurity and affordability. Last month, we discussed the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board and what we hope the advisory board will achieve. We gained insights from our guests, and we are grateful. On what we currently do, I'm also inspired by a famous author, Louis Saker, who said, "It is better to take many small steps in the right direction than to make a great leap forward only to stumble backward." Then we will proceed to the approval of the minutes of the March 17th meeting. I'm hoping that all of the commissioners were able to review them. I need a motion and a second, please.
I'll make a motion. We approve the meeting minutes from March 17th.
Thank you, Norm.
I'll go ahead and second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So it has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the March 17th meeting be approved. And shall we just, is the raised hand working or how do we do this again? It's been a month, I can't remember.
I think either with your physical hand or raised hand.
Okay, so those who are in
virtually, either way.
favor, please raise your hand. And if you have any objections, please say so. Lisa, are you taking?
Yes, I'm tracking that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe it has been approved, correct?
Yes, the minutes are approved. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a few updates since our last meeting. The South San Francisco City Council has issued a proclamation denouncing anti-Asian racism and violence and had distributed flyers to all Asian establishments to educate our community on what to do if they're experiencing or witnessing a hate crime. Also, in connection with the celebration of mental health awareness in the month of May, we are partnering with Sitique and the South San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We will hold a speaker series every Thursday at 3 p.m. on May 6th, 13th, and the 20th and 27th, and we will discuss how to deal with the stigma attached to seeking help on mental health issues, how COVID exacerbates mental health symptoms, our mental health equity, and how to cultivate resilience. This educational series are offered for free and conducted by health professionals from Sitique. Please register if you're interested by going to the South San Francisco Chamber of Commerce website starting next week. Since also it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Mental Health Awareness Month in the month of May, our library has also lined up 3 events that everyone is invited. First will be the May 7th at 4 p.m. on the library's Facebook page. Oliver Chin and Juan Calle will share their graphic novel, Awesome Asian Americans. May 20th at 2 p.m., the Asian Art Museum will present The Language of Flowers in Asian Art. And May 27th at 2 p.m., a panel will share their journey of recovery and how they reach the place of wellness in an environment plagued by pandemic, racism, and violence. And last but not the least, we also want to say thank you to Sharon Watts, our management fellow, who is moving on to another opportunity. We wish her the best on her new endeavor, and the commission will definitely miss her. Sharon wrote a beautiful letter to the commissioners, and we will share that with you tomorrow. We'll send it by email. Has the city manager joined us, Mike? No? I know that he has some updates, right? So, Kim, is that my section?
Well, maybe what we can do in terms of the updates that Mike was going to present, we could always come back.
Okay.
I can start with the goals.
Sure. I'm turning it over now to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Happy afternoon. Happy to be with you all today during this very intense week. And in particular, really glad to be working with you on this commission for another month. Today's goals include reviewing updates and additional information related to Strategy 3.2, as the chair just provided an overview on, specifically expanding support to address housing insecurity for priority populations, and Strategy 4.1, increasing housing that is affordable. Then we'll have a chance to identify some recommendations related to those 2 strategies. So we'll do that by hearing from Nell Sellender, the Deputy Director for Economic and Community Development for South San Francisco, as well as Eric Yurkovich from Ramey Associates, our team, who is leading the general plan update for South San Francisco. Then we'll have an opportunity to break into small groups. We'll also have an opportunity to hear from the public, followed by a commission discussion. And then we'll end the meeting with an update from SSF USD on their related work and talk about next steps. And as always, we want to remind everyone of the group agreements that this commission adopted at our first meeting back in August, along with the guiding principles. I think the principles in particular remain very critical for our work, especially number 1, recognizing systemic racism and social inequities, and number 4, focusing on action and systems change. So today, we just go to the next slide. We will be focusing on goal 3, reducing harm of structural inequities by targeting resources to residents of color. We've already touched on strategy 3.1 and 3.3. So today's focus will be on 3.2, expanding information and supporting and support to address housing insecurity. I will mention, and Mike will talk about this when we hear from him, but while the commission didn't prioritize strategy 3.5, supporting and expanding economic opportunities for priority populations, which is that last strategy on the slide, for this first year, the city is already moving pretty substantially on that strategy, and we'll hear a little bit more about how the city is doing that.
And Mike has joined us whenever we want to.
Oh,
Great.
good. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Hi.
Let's go back to your update. Wonderful.
Perfect timing,
Welcome, Mike.
actually.
There we go. I was, first, I apologize, a little tardy. We had a meeting with all of the hotel general managers to discuss COVID and recovery that ran a little long. And then when I got in, I was a participant and not a panelist. So I was waving my hands, but nobody could see me. So any event, glad to be here now. Thank you. So updates and programs and initiative. There we go. There are 2 slides, but I wanted to let you know of the work that City Council has been doing over the last 3 months in a coordinated, holistic effort to break the cycle of poverty. And I know this group has a huge amount to do with that in our discussions earlier in our lifespan here last year. And we put them all together. As you can see, affordable housing, we'll talk about today, rental and food assistance. We're standing up a community support center. That's the next slide. We'll get there. The council's committed to universal pre-K and is now designated well over $2 million to bridge the digital divide, including today, we opened up a program to give away free laptops to qualifying individuals. And I know the response to that today has been very robust. And now we're working on the one in red is guaranteed income. We're not there yet. Council has notionally set aside $2 million for that as matching funds. And I had 2 calls earlier today with potential donors trying to raise money for that. But many of these have happened in the past, but they've been in silos. They've been, one-offs. We're taking a completely different approach of taking that individual in need, and they may or may not be unemployed or underemployed, and giving wraparound services, case management services, staying with them until hopefully they get into a positive financial trajectory. And we know from studies that once a family manages to break that cycle of poverty, it is far more likely that succeeding generations will not fall into poverty. So it really is tripling down on our efforts is not strong enough on what we're doing. So next slide. And this goes into the community support center. So all total over 2.2 million dedicated to this effort. I was with Congressman Spear's office yesterday trying to grow the effort, but we will open on Grand Avenue a brick and mortar community support center, which is more of a one-stop shop for social services. It will have a strong focus with the Renaissance Center, which is a nonprofit helping small businesses, training, support, helping people start their small business. And then also another nonprofit that's been very successful in Santa Clara County, Job Train, which works with the unemployed, the underemployed, job training, financial planning, case management, one-on-one help with people. In there too, 2 full-time community navigators. The city council is committed to funding for that, as well as 3 part-time promotories, which will have a specific focus in the Latinx community. And you'll recognize, yes, this is straight out of one of our strategies from last year that inspired this and is moving forward. But picture an individual comes to this center on Grand Avenue looking for job training and help. They can see, oh, you also have information on rental assistance. Oh, you also have a food pantry so that we can address the food insecurity. Try to make it super easy, all in one place, in a friendly, supported environment, but really punch poverty in the nose and super resource this and get out into the community with this. So we're very excited about what is happening, and it's happening pretty quickly. We've had, I think, 3 study sessions now with council. The lease for the building on Grand Avenue is on the council agenda for next week. And we are rolling. Last week, council approved the contracts with the Renaissance Center and with Job Train to get that moving. But I tell you, city staff, and I know council we're just very enthusiastic about this opportunity, this promise that through this strategy, well-resourced and sustainable, we can make a real positive difference in South San Francisco. So I wanted to share that with you. Again, we're just very excited about that. And I appreciate the work of this commission in really voicing the need for a lot of this and bringing it to the forefront.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right. So I think this last slide shows that we'll be talking also today about strategy 4.1, increasing housing that is affordable with a focus on meeting the housing needs of priority population, which lives within the goal of ensuring ongoing oversight and accountability to advance racial and social equity. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Myra.
So the grounding exercise for this particular meeting, especially with what is going on nationally, we definitely are here to examine what's not working so that it can be fixed, to work on solutions. But I wanted to just take a short moment to ask the commissioners, what are you most proud of and excited about that this commission has done? It's not to divorce issues and problems, because that's being worked on and that'll happen. But just take one moment, and if any of you could share, what is it about this experience that you are most excited about, you are most proud of as a commissioner? And anyone, just start.
Myra, I can go, unless Pat wants to go first. I saw her hand up. What I was excited about is the fact that one of the things we brought up earlier was bringing mental health professionals and partnering with the city. I know that was something that the council and the commission here talked about a lot. And I wanted to recognize the staff for helping us implement that with the county. And because of the work here, we are a pilot program with the county with having mental health professionals work with our police department in terms of those who call in and potentially could get some sort of assistance from mental health professionals. And I'm really excited about that pilot program. And I think it's going to be very successful. And I think it was one of the early signs for me that showed that this commission was real and it wanted to do some real work. And there's been a lot of accomplishments along the way that I'm also proud of, but seeing the early work of that was something that I was really impressed. Thank you, Myra.
That's fantastic. Does someone else have something that they want to call out?
I'm not, the thing that I'm most proud of is, I'm not going to mention like all the different things that have come out of this commission, which I'm really surprised that there have been so many so many things that came from this commission. But I'm most proud of the fact that we are a group of, 13 people or more that are working together. We're from all different communities in South San Francisco. We're working together. We're sharing our views. We're listening and then coming to agreement on what's important to us. And I think that's pretty exciting because, we're not just sitting here talking. We're actually coming up with suggestions and our council and our city manager have listened, and they've brought things to us and move forward with things. So that's what I'm most proud of.
And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to impact change. Is there another commissioner who wants to add and call out something?
Commissioner Edith, I think your hand is up.
Yes, if I can just add, I mean, I did wanted to talk about what just, was said. So I'm not going to repeat that. But definitely, I personally also want to say that seeing that the 3 promotores are, in the list that you just showed makes me feel that a lot of the askings and the brainstorming that together we did. I mean, seeing that and thinking about the Latinx community, which is, you know, about a third of this city, if not more, makes me feel very hopeful and very appreciative that this work is being done and that we are all here together working to make South City a better place for everybody.
Is there anyone else?
Commissioner Norm, it looks like you have your hand up.
I'm just going to summarize what they said. I completely agree. But the positive thing I'm seeing here is it shows that it's a beginning. It's a start. And you can't start or get to the finish line until you start. And we've started, and that's the biggest thing I'm going to say. You know, we've got programs, city support, staff. Again, we've started the race. Let's not stop or get lazy. Let's keep going. And as we run into the stumbling blocks that can occur, we learn from them, but don't let anything die or stagnate.
Kim, I think that might be it for now,
Okay.
unless there's someone I don't see on my screen.
Anybody else? Oh, Commissioner Hermes?
I just want to say that I'm excited to see the commitment that all of us show every month. I find it very encouraging from the city staff, the consulting company, and so that encouraged me to keep the community. And I find that very
It's a little hard to hear you, Commissioner Hermes. But it sounds like you're echoing similar thoughts and proud of the work. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Vanessa. I can't seem to raise my hand, but I want to echo everybody else's sentiment, but also the public that come and voice their opinions and are coming to these meetings and listening. And I feel that I'm very excited to see what's going to come of all of our ideas and moving progress forward. So I'm most proud that we're continuing with the effort and that people are bringing ideas from different backgrounds and making South City better.
Thank you so much. One last comment. Are we ready to move on? Okay. I think we can go to the next slide. So thank you, Myra, for that. So related to reviewing racial inequities and commission identified priorities related to housing inequities, we wanted to first kind of set the stage again and remind ourselves of past conversations that we've heard the commissioners have, particularly related to systemic racism contributing and how it contributes to housing insecurity. So how many of you have heard that April is Fair Housing Month? Okay, a couple, one. The poster on the right is from HUD, or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and visually outlines this idea or concept of fair housing. Fair housing is about making sure that people have housing that allows them to live in communities that have safe parks, grocery stores, educational institutions, and other opportunities. The Housing Discrimination Unmasked poster, the one to the left there, is also by HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and points out what this commission has also talked about, that housing inequities have been further exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. In other words, this commission has identified key ways that systemic racism contributes to housing insecurity. It comes in the form of housing discrimination and the many forms that takes, as well as insufficient incomes and assets to be able to be included in the SSF housing market. So we've heard those points, and what we wanted to do is to address those main issues again through the identified priorities that you all talked about in prior meetings to address systemic racism and housing insecurity in South San Francisco. Specifically, you mentioned the importance of increasing incomes for key populations and how that is related to housing insecurity, keeping people housed who are at risk of homelessness, ensuring that residents can still afford to live in SSF, so anti-displacement, and exploring developing land assets in SSF to build housing. So with that, I will hand it over to Nell Selander, who again is the Deputy Director for Economic and Community Development for South San Francisco, to present more about the strategies that we're talking about.
All right, thanks so much, Kim. Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, Council Member, Trustee, and Commissioners. I'm Nell Selander, Deputy Director for Economic and Community Development. And I'm here today just to speak briefly with you about the Commission identified goal to expand information and support to address housing insecurity for priority populations. I'm really going to focus on efforts the city already has underway. And I apologize, I just remembered we're doing simultaneous translation, so I will speak more slowly. All right, so to begin, I'd like to share the definition the Commission crafted for the term priority populations. For our purposes, for this Commission, priority populations include people of color in South San Francisco, low-income people in South San Francisco, disadvantaged communities, which is a geographic definition based on health and economic outcomes, and then people with disabilities. Our goal is obviously to target outreach and services to these priority populations, and specific services that we offer or specific programs that the city funds or runs may be targeted to one of these groups, right? Or all of them. And that depending on the program or service, the priority population may be slightly different. And I think that'll be important for the Commission to identify as it continues its work in making recommendations and goals, as priority populations is actually quite a broad definition. And to the extent that the Commission wants to focus on a particular group within that priority population, I think that's a great way to craft programs and target our scarce resources. All right, on to the next slide. So Kim just discussed this, but I'm framing my discussion of interventions the city is already taking to expand information and support to address housing insecurity around these specific priorities that the Commission has already recommended. That way you can see the city's programs right in line with your own priorities, and then give us feedback or brainstorm more ways that we may deepen our commitment to these priorities. So as Kim mentioned, it's increasing income, keeping people housed, ensuring residents can still afford to live here, and then developing land assets for housing. So I'll go through these one by one. All right, so in terms of increasing income for key populations, City Council approved on April 14th, and our city manager just referenced, 2 substantial contracts for companion initiatives in workforce development and small business and entrepreneurship assistance. And these programs will provide hands-on case management driven services to small businesses that are really struggling to survive right now and are underemployed and unemployed residents that are seeking a more sustainable career. So council is also, as Mike noted, considering a basic income program, which would, at least on a year and a half long basis, provide some supplemental income to those households in greatest need in our community. We would definitely fall into the Commission's priority population definition. All right, on to number 2. So in terms of keeping people housed who are at risk of becoming unhoused or homeless, there really is a range of assistance available now. You know, I think how this assistance really plays out over the next few months and who's able to access it is yet to be seen, although I know at a staff level we have great confidence in the programs that are out there and the amount of funding that is available for renter assistance and assistance for smaller landlords that may not be able to keep their properties safe for this assistance. So right now, federal, state, and county funds for rental assistance are all being funneled through one application portal. I wanted to make sure that everyone on the commission was aware of it and that you are able to share it with your networks, your neighbors, your friends, and family. It's housingiskey.com. It forwards to a state application portal. Most of this is federal money that's been targeted to the state and then also to the county, but the county opted to combine its funds with the state so that there's only one place folks have to go to apply. And that's intended to really make it easier for lower income individuals to access this financial assistance. I will note that landlords and tenants need to apply jointly to maximize the financial benefit for everyone involved, especially for the tenant, but that if a landlord is unwilling to participate in the program, tenants can absolutely seek assistance on their own. And then technical assistance for this program is available through our local YMCA. The YMCA is also where folks should go if they're not qualified for or not eligible for the state and county assistance, because we still do have local assistance through the YMCA. And that's all for renter assistance or folks that have been unable to pay rent due to COVID. Finally, I want to mention a couple critical nonprofits, Project Sentinel, which our Vice Mayor is quite familiar with, and Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County, that provide legal assistance and counseling to our residents. This can help immensely in cases of eviction or landlord-tenant disputes, and their contact information is available on our website. We have a shortened URL for renter resources. That's ssf.net/renterhelp. We highly encourage you to share that with your networks as well. And then finally, I did include on this slide a note about the city's red tag ordinance, which was adopted a couple of years ago. And the purpose of this ordinance is to provide financial assistance, that's relocation assistance, to any household that's displaced because their unit is deemed uninhabitable. So if a landlord has not been maintaining a unit, or perhaps it's an unpermitted unit and it's the subject of a code enforcement action and the household has to move, they are entitled to some relocation assistance. And that's what this ordinance sets up. So on to number 3, to ensure that residents can still afford to live in South San Francisco, the city has a number of initiatives aimed at addressing housing production and then affordability. And specifically, the city has a commercial linkage fee. I don't know if you're familiar with these. They're essentially an affordable housing fee on commercial development. So office development, R&D development, hotel, retail, any new development would be subject to this fee. And that goes into a trust fund for affordable housing that must be spent on households making less than 120% of the area median income. And that fee is expected to generate significant revenue in the coming years. The city also has an inclusionary housing requirement, meaning any market rate residential developer has to include a certain percentage of affordable units in their development. And that allows us to create a sprinkling of affordable units, both rental and for sale, across the city as all new development takes place. There are also, I think, really important to note, state laws in place that limit rent increases and provide tenants with just cause eviction protections. And those were adopted just about I guess it's like almost 2 years ago now, and went into effect shortly before COVID struck. But that limits rent increases on most properties in California, most multifamily properties in California. And then finally, we do have our main line. So anyone needing housing assistance can call our main line, 829-6620. And it's primarily answered by one of our team members, Inez Mendez, who's been with the city for quite some time and lives in the community. She's a native Spanish speaker, and it just knows all of the housing resources and can refer anyone in need to a multitude of services in our community. And so that's a great benefit as well, and important to the services that we do provide. All right, and then finally, explore developing land assets in South San Francisco to build housing. This is a tricky one, right? The city and the city's former redevelopment agency own fairly scarce land that is surplus and not being used for a city use. And so the way that the sale of public land works now under new state law is that any property that is deemed surplus that the city no longer needs, it's declared surplus by council and then offered first for affordable housing development. So even just this change in state law is really gonna result in cities like South San Francisco, as well as across the state, and really offering its excess land first to affordable housing developers. And the city is very much sort of in that vein anyway. We do include quite a bit of affordable housing, if not exclusively affordable housing, at publicly sold sites recently. One notable project is the Grand and Linden Family Apartments. It's going to be built by Rome at the corner. There's 2 properties and 80 units combined, and that is all very deeply affordable at the 50 to 30% area median income level. So that's a great development on publicly owned land that is now coming to fruition. And then finally, I do want to note that other publicly owned land in South San Francisco could absolutely be developed for housing, you know, if it's in an area zoned for housing. But of course, that is subject to action by a different jurisdiction or a different agency. So although it is public land, the city doesn't necessarily control it. And so we like to always partner with, you know, our peer agencies and jurisdictions to try and see affordable housing brought to bear, but we are not the only player in that. So now on to my last slide, which is really just intended to share with you how we're getting the word out to these priority populations about all the services I just talked about. We're really open to your feedback here. I believe in your breakout sessions, commissioners will be asked about how else we can get the word out. Like, is there a medium we're missing that we really need to be sure to use in order to reach these priority populations? Over the past few months, we've relied quite a bit actually on mailed paper, going out in the mail to households we know are in our sort of priority population targeted areas, in addition to all the social media and email and digital advertising, just because we know sometimes folks aren't getting that message online, or maybe they aren't getting in the mail. So we try to hit both of those. So in the past few months, we've mailed postcards to every renter occupied household in South San Francisco. And that's been in 4 languages. In English, of course, Spanish, of course, simplified Chinese, and then Tagalog, just with a very clear message. If you're scared of eviction, don't move until you have more information, to try to just stop people in their tracks and think hard about, hey, before I move, before I do anything else, have I consulted the resources available to me? We also provided flyers with a similar message to our churches and community organizations. So we have a list of them. We contacted all of them. Hey, would you like flyers? Would you like it digitally? Can you share it with your congregations, with your clients? And then, of course, as I mentioned, we use all the usual social media, Nextdoor, email blast, website, digital avenues that we have at our fingertips. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, we have a simplified URL, ssf.net/renterhelp. And that's just really intended to allow people to share the information quickly rather than a very long, difficult to type in URL when we're sending out mailers and flyers. And now happy to answer any questions you may have.
I wonder if it might make sense to have Eric go, and then maybe we do joint questions at the end, if that's okay? Okay.
Absolutely.
Priscilla, would you mind if we waited until after, I see that you have a hand up. I'm going to
sorry,
invite
Priscilla's a member of the public, so she can speak at public comment, unfortunately.
public comment. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Paige. So I'd like to now invite Eric Yurkovich from Ramey and Associates to present about leveraging land assets to increase housing that is affordable. So welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Kim, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see many of you who have been participating in the SHAPE SSF process for the last 2 years. It's good to see you guys all in this forum as well. My name is Eric Yurkovich. I'm a principal at Ramey and Associates, and we've been working with the city on the general plan update for the last couple of years. I'm going to go through some slides pretty quickly to give you a background on the general plan, what it will address, and the types of engagement that we've done to date on that general plan. And then I'm going to briefly talk about the parallel housing element that's happening as well for the city of South San Francisco and how that housing element fits within to the general plan update itself. And then I'm just going to describe a few of those draft goals and policies that we developed around housing and how they relate to the work that you've been doing on the commission. So as many of you know, the general plan is a long-range policy document for the city that really maps out how the city of South San Francisco serves its community. Every city and county in California is required to have and regularly maintain their general plan. So everything from parks to shopping centers to roads are a result of these types of planning efforts. The plan itself sets forth a 20-year vision for the future, building on community strengths and assets while tackling new and emerging challenges. You can go to the next slide. The state of California requires cities and counties to address 8 mandatory elements or chapters, and those are listed at the top of the slide. Those include land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, and now most recently, environmental justice. The housing element process is being run in parallel to the general plan update. So the city is part of a regional collaborative called 21 Elements. And this collaborative is really bringing together residents, stakeholders, and communities across the region to share ideas about housing policy. This 21 Elements process kicked off around the new year, and they're now going through a series of community meetings about the housing element now, which I'll talk about a little bit later in my presentation. You can go to the next slide. This graphic shows the simplified process for the general plan update. We kicked off the process with a discovery phase where we reviewed existing conditions and published a series of reports. We then worked with the community and the community advisory committee to really understand what you love about South San Francisco, what you want to see in the future. This listening really helped us draft a vision statement, series of core values and guiding principles. We then moved into a phase of the project where we developed land use alternatives. The end result of this work was a preferred land use plan that is now being studied as part of the environmental impact report, zoning code update, and climate action plan. The preferred land use plan identified both areas for new housing development like East of 101 and Lindenville, as well as infill opportunities in neighborhoods like Westboro and El Camino. We're now in the process of generating and developing policy ideas for the general plan and just wrapped up a series of framework meetings in March. Next slide. And during this process, we've done kind of a significant number of community engagement activities. And this is just a sort of a snapshot of those activities. These include in-person activities like visioning workshops and sub-area meetings. And then during the COVID-19 pandemic, we really did have to pivot to virtual engagement. So these include virtual workshops, surveys, and more. Next slide. As I mentioned, the housing element is running in parallel to the broader general plan process, but I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background on that housing element this evening. The purpose of the housing element is really to facilitate the production of housing at different income levels for different households and different family types. The housing element really seeks to remove constraints to housing improve existing housing within the community, and then to promote fair housing. There are various components of the housing element, which I'm not going to get into in much detail. It's actually one of the most technical elements of the general plan, but they really look at current and future housing needs. They look at those constraints to housing, whether they're governmental constraints from regulations or from other market conditions. And they really evaluate what the current housing element in the city says, and they consider new housing programs and policies that have come about over the last 8 years. And I think very importantly, the housing element makes sure that there's enough land in every community zoned for housing to accommodate projected growth and demand within each community. The results of all of this analysis and policy development become what's called the city's housing plan, or the housing element, and it's really focused on goals, policies, and implementation. Unlike other elements of the general plan, it's updated every 8 years by state law, and it has to be certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide. But housing isn't really only in the housing element. It's tied to other elements like land use, mobility, safety, environmental justice, to name a few. So for example, in the land use element, we document existing residential land use, and we establish policy direction, including the proposed location and density of future housing development within a community. In the mobility element, we ask questions about how we can coordinate transportation and land use, really to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. And we even start to think about how changes in parking regulations can support more affordable housing opportunities in the city. So you kind of think about it from each of the elements and how they can support our housing goals. Next slide. And throughout the process, we heard a lot of really great ideas from the community and community advisory committee about housing in the city. We heard about the need for housing, particularly affordable housing. We heard about the need for more ownership to enable wealth building. We heard about the desire to equitably distribute housing across the city, the need to address the housing crisis, and the need to have renter protections, especially after the COVID-19 moratoriums are lifted. And we have heard concerns about single-family zoning as an exclusionary practice. And we also heard concerns about the loss of single-family zoning within the city. But over and over and over, I think what we heard is a need for creativity and addressing some of these issues in the community. We took all of that feedback that we received along the way and drafted what we call a series of policy frameworks, which I'm going to get into in just a second. These frameworks are really an interim step in developing the chapters or the elements of the general plan. And I would call what you're going to see next maybe a 50 to 75% draft of some ideas of the goals, policies, and implementation actions for the general plan themselves. And we hosted a series of community conversations around these policy frameworks back in March, giving folks an opportunity to review, provide input before all of this material is published as one big general plan. And the following goals and policies are included in the land use and the environmental justice policy frameworks. Because the housing element is running parallel to our process and kicked off a little bit more recently, we don't have a housing element framework, but these are the types of ideas that will be in that framework. So the first goal that you see up on your screen now is really to protect vulnerable residents from displacement, which really works to help reduce housing insecurity in the shorter term. That included things like developing an anti-displacement plan in areas like downtown and Sign Hill. These types of plans include policies around just cause evictions, renter relocation, and eviction moratoriums for those families most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, amongst others. It also looks at providing assistance to homeowners who are at risk of foreclosure and connecting residents to county resources, like you were talking about earlier, like HART, which is a down payment assistance program. Next slide. The next goal really focuses on creating a supply of affordable housing to help reduce that housing insecurity. So again, in the shorter term, it looks at encouraging the preservation of what we call existing naturally occurring affordable housing. So these are often older private rental housing that are offering relatively affordable rents compared to those newer housing units in the community. These units are not regulated or deed restricted in a lot of cases in terms of their rents, but communities like Oakland have developed loan programs for the rehab and preservation of these units. The draft policies also recommend exploration and expanded use of shared equity homeownership models like community land trusts. And for those who are less familiar, community land trust is a nonprofit organization that acquires land for the permanent benefit of low-income communities. And then there's some shorter term things. In the longer term, we look to continue the implementation of the city's inclusionary housing ordinance and the application of the state density bonuses. Those are ways that the city can encourage and incentivize affordable housing and new development, as well as exploring overlay zones. So either through affordable housing or transit-oriented community overlays, which provide developers incentive to include more affordable housing units in their projects. Next slide. The policy frameworks also developed a few policies to reduce housing insecurity for people with homes and for people without homes. So this includes expanding maintenance and abatement programs for both single family and multifamily properties of low-income households. These could be things like promoting weatherization, modernization, even elimination of common household pollutants like lead paint. It also includes the implementation of programs like HUD's Housing First program, which is the idea of creating permanently supportive housing for those who are homeless or nearly homeless. Next slide. And next, we want to ensure that the city has a diverse range of housing options for people of all ages, income levels, and family types. And this goal really helps to reduce housing insecurity and really leverage some of those land assets for affordable housing. And key to this is the promotion of a variety of housing types developed at a range of densities to equitably serve the community. So this will be implemented in part through the city's land use map, the general plan land use map, the zoning code, and housing element policies. So we do this by designing development standards, for example, that encourage residential development on vacant and underutilized land. And I just want to highlight one other thing here, which is there was an active conversation during our land use alternatives process, which is about the need to actively facilitate affordable and workforce housing across all South San Francisco neighborhoods equitably. And this idea was really discussed in that land use planning process, but really it helps us to meet the state requirements around affirmatively furthering fair housing. So that was a big part of that conversation as well. Next slide. And these policy frameworks that we just drew these goals and actions, goals, policies, and actions from are still out for public review and comment. They're located on the SHAPE SSF project website. You can review the elements, add comments in, review the comments from other people, comment on their comments. So it's a real opportunity for additional community conversation around these policy frameworks. Next slide. And here is the website for that parallel housing element process. It's letstalkhousing.org. You should go there. You can learn about their upcoming events that are coming down the pipe in the next few months, as well as they're constantly adding new materials about the housing element over time. And we really encourage you all to get involved in the housing element process. And then finally, just one more slide. If you have any questions about that process, there are a number of ways that you can get more information. So you can text to the phone number on the screen, 650-677-1598. And there's an upcoming meeting tomorrow, April 22nd. It's called All About the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And for more information on events, please visit their website. So thanks again for having me here today, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you so much. And I want to take a few minutes for questions, and again, thank Nell and Eric for so much information. I think, we wanted to make sure that you heard all of this information this afternoon, because I know that in the conversations with Eric about the general plan update process and now about the programs and services, there seems to be, from what I can see and what I'm hearing, is that there's also kind of a ripple effect of this commission throughout the city that is raising these issues in these different places during the conversations, and they're coming out in events and policies and goals and programs. And I think it's important for you all to hear, you know, how you're making an impact really across the city in these areas. And so maybe with that, we'll take a few questions and then we'll go into small groups. If anyone has a question for Nell or Eric. And actually the questions are gonna have to stick with commissioners, and then anyone who's not a commissioner will welcome your questions during public comment, which comes after the small groups. Does any commissioner have a question for Nell or Eric? Commissioner Hermes, your hand is raised.
Question for Neil.
Please talk as loudly as possible because it's a little hard to hear.
My question is for Neil about the affordable housing coming on Linden and Lux. Is the whole building for affordable, or is only how many affordable units will be available in that location?
And that's for Nell,
yeah. The Grand and Linden Apartments by Rome, which is there on Linden, and then there's also another site at Grand and Cypress. Those are both fully affordable. So all 84 units will be affordable.
Thank you. Is there another question from a commissioner for Nell or Eric? Looking around.
I have a question. I can't raise my hand, unfortunately. It's more for Eric. Eric, in the general plan conversations, has there been any talk about, I saw there was something about housing for individuals with disabilities. I'm just wondering what the conversation is about regarding that in terms of being inclusive.
Thanks, Commissioner Nogales. I appreciate that question. I think the conversation was around sort of universal design principles. I think that's the right terminology to use, and about as we start developing new housing units, how in particular you could shape those so that they're accessible to a wider variety of ages, disabilities, and types of people who might be living in the community. So I think there's those specifically related to age, but also other disabilities as well. So thinking about how we design units to make them inclusive for those people. And I know my colleague Diana Benitez talked about a program in the county, a San Mateo County program, which was kind of looking at aging in place and how the county was kind of helping through one of their programs, this helping kind of older residents kind of transition and age in place over time. So it might be moving in a building, might be staying in a unit, but retrofitting the unit a little bit to make it safer for them as they aged in place.
And then just another follow-up question with Community Land Trust. In terms of the conversation, I just wanted to get a little more information about that. I know we've talked about it in the past, but in terms of the conversation, is it more about acquiring property and then allowing for nonprofits to come in and just take over from that point? I was wondering if there's more been a deeper conversation about that from folks who've been participating in the general plan.
Great. It's another great question. I think the conversation was about it as an idea to explore as part of the general plan update. We didn't get into the details of who is the purchaser of the land, how it would get transitioned to a nonprofit, but generally kind of having that as one of the tools in our toolbox to explore to increase affordable housing options to a variety of people in the community, and then have that opportunity for those populations also to build wealth in home and home ownership, right? Since it's such a good it's such a pathway for wealth building. But we didn't get into kind of the details I think you're referring to in your comment.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Edith. looks like you have a question.
Yes, it's more of a comment or awareness. I wanted to just really make sure that I do a comment about following up with Commissioner Vice Major said that individuals with disabilities. So when we talk about disabilities, I hope that you also include individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and not just, you know, those who you're making the affordable so that, or designing so that they're, you know, included because of the physicality of the building, but also thinking about the population that we have in South San Francisco of young adults who are, you know, growing in our city and will not have the income that somebody else as their peers have, and who are in a family where parents, you know, who knows, might not be there for them in the future and might end up being homeless because of that, right? So I like to just really create awareness of that, and that's also considered when you're planning and thinking about this population, and that the word disability moves into not just the physical or the, you know, the structure of the place, but also of those individuals who really need that support because of their developmental intellectual disabilities too. Thank you.
Would it be all right if I just shared a little tidbit on that note that I think is really important?
Yeah.
So, and Edith may be aware that the state's low-income housing tax credit sort of scoring, which is really how affordable housing projects come to fruition, right? Counties often put in a little bit of money, cities often put in a little bit of money or land, but if you can't get low-income housing tax credits, it's going to be really hard to get your affordable housing project built. And the newest iteration of TCAT guidelines give a lot of weight to supportive housing and also housing for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which I think over time, even in the sort of medium term, will, you know, really encourage affordable developers to set aside more of those units for those households in need. So I thought that was really an interesting change at the state level that will directly impact what we see that gets built at the local level. So just, and I think that's encouraging for what we'll see in the future.
And really quickly add that other cities are doing it. And so we can probably just take a look at what other cities are doing right now. Thank you.
And I can make a quick add, sorry, Lisa Costa-Sanders. With the 21 Elements effort, and that's doing the housing element update, we did have a meeting and we heard from Housing Choices, the nonprofit that provided information to assist us in assessing the housing needs of developmentally disabled. And they're going to continue to give us some information and give us some resources that we can include in the housing element update process. And also the 21 Elements group is studying how maybe there could be a regional effort around community land trusts. You know, it may be hard for one jurisdiction to do it, but maybe as a county-wide, that might be an effort to be considered. So I just wanted to mention those two items.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So again, thank you so much, Nell and Eric, for coming this afternoon and presenting. If commissioners have additional questions, there's time at the end, although it's narrowing a little bit, but to ask and answer additional questions. What we wanted to do next is to break into small groups and talk a little bit more in depth about how to make sure that these strategies address racial and social inequities, which is kind of, you know, the essential purpose of this commission. Always want to make sure that lens is crystal clear for all the strategies. So Paige, I think we're going to go into 3 groups. Is that right?
Yes, opening them now.
Okay, so we'll see you in the groups and we'll have about
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
I think people have already been pushed.
Already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Hi, Commissioners. So let's see, we have Commissioner Hermes, Kayla, Norm, and Mark, and Mike. Great, and then welcome community members as well. So we always like to kick off the small groups just with a reminder of the group agreements and guiding principles, which we saw earlier this afternoon. And I think I'll go right into the questions since we're a little short on time. So we have two questions for you. The first one was one that Nell posed in her conversations with us and wanted to make sure we had time with you all as commissioners to think even more deeply. I feel like there's a lot of work at the city already happening related to making sure that priority populations are reached. But we wanted to take a minute to see if you had any additional ideas about how to ensure that the programs and services related to housing insecurity reach priority populations.
I had jotted down a few thoughts if I could start.
Wonderful.
Okay. So just thinking about where the priority populations might be most commonly found, schools. Right now, there's all these COVID testing sites, vaccination sites, food distribution sites. So sharing other resources when people are already going out of their way to those places. Public transportation, bus stops, train stations. Then thinking about local organizations who are more proximate with community already and using them to get the word out. And lastly, kind of a different note, but landlords should be educated on what people's rights are and educated on what legal requirements they have to share that information with their own tenant.
Thank you. And so you mentioned the schools, Kayla, especially now with the COVID sites set up there so that there's maybe an opportunity to provide multiple points of information. So housing insecurity information at the COVID testing site, for example. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, the other one I mentioned was public transportation.
And food distribution, right? Okay. Those places. Thank you. Any other thoughts that want to build on that? Thinking of those ideas?
Well, we will be kicking off soon the Promotores program and the community navigators, which will be a face-to-face with a trusted advisor who's culturally appropriate, language appropriate, because so much of it really is a trust issue. We hope that this can bridge that gap.
That's such a critical program. I mean, that's a well-established, best practice throughout the country and locally in the Bay Area for sure. And I know that, or I assume, as you said, Mike, that the navigators and promotores are from South San Francisco, know the neighborhoods really well, already have established relationships. It seems like they're going to mostly be focusing in Spanish. Is that right? But additional languages as well?
That is correct. We're going to start in the Latinx community.
Okay. Okay. And so that's in addition to all of the other kind of social media, kind of the examples that are on the left there, or print media that's being sent to all of the household renter occupied households in 4 languages. I don't know if there's anything else that commissioners want to say about promotores or the community navigators to support their work in any way. Okay. Have we covered all of our ideas? Are we good? Excellent. Okay. So in terms of, let's see, so I think this one was related to
It's just a question of if there's anything in addition to what people said around outreach, or Kayla and Mike at least said about outreach, specific to any of the programs and kind of initiatives and resources that Nell outlined that are currently exist, if there's any kind of additional ways that or considerations to ensure that those existing programs advance
Reach the
racial and
priority
social
population.
equities. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you just said covers the making sure that the priority populations are reached through these programs. Okay, yeah, Commissioner Hermes.
Yeah, I would like to add if the community support center starts, we can help, we can just to have workshops targeted, for example, to Old Town, for example, and to be a workshop or two workshops to attract the neighbors and so that we can learn.
Oh, very interesting. So through the community support center, the idea that I understood you to explain is to have kind of engaging Old Town residents in those workshops, so community specific workshops, like neighborhood specific workshops at the community support center. Is that right?
That way they are familiar what is on the community support center and they can learn what it could bring to the community and expand from that point. Let's start working, everybody start getting familiar with the city is doing on that.
I think that's a great idea, and I know that you've mentioned a number of times an interest in a brick and mortar support center, and I wonder if by specifically inviting Old Town residents to a particular engagement, if that kind of bridges what you've talked about in the past with this particular community center. I like that idea.
Kim, as a council, we've actually talked about that in terms of making sure there's community engagement, let's say workshops or events at this new community center or this resource center. It was something that we prioritized as an opportunity to outreach to the community and use the promotorias to help educate our neighbors and our friends. So we recognize that as something we want to do.
Wonderful. So again, I think it seems to me as every time I talk to someone, it's like this commission has kind of this ripple effect, right? And I know, Hermes, you are very busy and attending a lot of meetings, so maybe you're part of the ripple.
Yeah.
But I think that's exciting, when you start seeing that different meetings that could be very distinct and yet that they're considering what was said that's relevant in this other meeting. So yeah, it looks like Hermes, you want to say something else?
I would like to add, and that's exactly what we suggested at the beginning, brick and mortar and the Old Town. But as of for now, we appreciate the city doing the efforts for the community support center on Grand Avenue. But let's take it as an example that having a brick and mortar on the location will really make an impact. Having on the other side of the city doesn't make an impact. So we applaud the initiative as of today. Hopefully that can be a example to the community for the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on this? I think we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to get to our next question.
To build on what I just said, if he having this center in a different part of the city, I know we have the SF shuttle. We can make sure that these areas, the shuttle has access, makes that a regular route stop. So I think that's something that additionally could be worked out.
Consider how to connect through transportation services. Okay.
You know, another form of engagement I think would be kind of different for the city is I haven't talked to the city manager about this, but maybe we will next year, is starting using video and live Facebook events, just doing blasts and information out there saying, you know, we have this going on in the city. You know, what I've noticed, like Facebook live videos are really popular for people just to follow and just to see, or just doing a video where the city, a representative from the city can just have a 2-minute video about what's happening and just send it out. You know, that might be another form of outreach that we can do both in English and in Spanish in terms of what's happening, and also providing resources to a lot of our residents, because residents, you know, a lot of residents use social media to find out what their information is. So there might be this might be another opportunity to use our great communications team in terms of doing something different.
I like it.
Good idea, Mark. I agree with you, because there's never enough communication or information. Any avenues we can tap into, let's do it.
Right.
I agree. Good point, Mark.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your ideas and thoughts about this. I think, you know, this last one, maybe we'll focus on strategy 4.1, just thinking about the conversation that Eric led us through and all the work that's happening with the housing element. And just wanted to open up, you know, since we're focused on racial and social equity, what other considerations we should maybe keep in mind related to that?
I can start off. For me, and I think Norm and Michael know this, is whenever we talk about affordable housing, there's always that question, what's affordable? And I think it's upon us to really kind of describe what affordability is in South San Francisco. You know, when we talk in technical terms, we say the AMI of 80% or lower. You know, for the inside baseball folks, we all know what that means. But if there's a regular person that's watching the meetings, they might not know what that is. So maybe really kind of driving home what affordability means in South San Francisco.
Yeah, breaking that down. Okay.
Because the affordability, to build what Mark says, the affordability, because we've been drilling with this for the last 5-6 years trying to get housing.
Right.
What we need for this is the 30-40% AMI. Most builders are coming in at 80 AMI. A lot of, if it's private property bought, not city property, to get 5 units is like pulling teeth. I know Mark's been going through it. I've been going through it, or we bring it to their attention. So we just have to keep pushing and taking advantage of it. Mark made a good point. The AMI is very confusing to what the affordability is for those who really need it. It's 30 or 40.
Kayla, it looked like you wanted to say something.
I was going to build off that and say something very similar, just that we should kind of disaggregate what we mean by affordable. And as we're tracking whether or not people are using the services, to make sure we're tracking by their AMI and also their race, their disability status, what have you, both to make sure that they're using the service, but also to make sure whatever outreach strategies we've been using are actually being effective. A different thing I would say is I still don't understand the accountability piece to this. We talked about this in our October meeting on housing, how we have not come anywhere close to meeting the housing guidance for the lower AMIs. And so I'm just thinking about how do we either hold ourselves more accountable if it's not like a state mandate, but really stick to what we say we're going to do. It's more of a question that I think will be needed to be investigated later on, not answered now.
No, and I think Kayla makes a great point, is that how do we encourage more developers to build more of the 30 to 50% AMI? Like what Norm is saying, you know, is that for a lot of these developers is what pencils out for them, right, Norm? You know, in terms
Exactly, because Mark, not to interrupt you, but you're exactly right. If they have a profit margin of 25 or 30% on this unit, on these properties, the tough part businesses aren't going to take their profit down to 20% and take 10% to put into affordable. They're just not. And that's what I find so frustrating at times sitting in committee meetings and planning commission. So,
yeah.
And then the last dot there, Paige, is just making sure that what I heard is that the units are available for the lowest income folks. Is that right? And that there's enough of them, Kayla? I mean, essentially,
Yeah, and
That's
what
what I heard.
happens if they aren't, right? Right now, there are no consequences to either the city or the developers or whomever.
Oh,
to
back to the accountability, the point of
Right.
like, how is that really called out? How do you enforce, or, you know, if that's the priority, that's the goal, but how to incentivize? I mean, I don't know if you do it, you know, as opposed to a stick, a carrot. I don't know.
The need could be seen because we saw like with the Rotary, they had their one property and then they built the other one and it filled up so fast. I mean, so it's not naive to us or not hidden from us. There is a definite need out there or a want.
Paige, I would say for the low and lowest, because those are two different categories in the AMI.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe is how do we get more nonprofits involved in the development process? I think that's a question. You know, like for the Rome project that was mentioned, that's 100% affordable. And they were able to get a nonprofit organization part of this is how do we get more nonprofits involved in the development process, which would lead to more affordable housing units. Because when it's a private developer, they're looking at their profit margins.
So that needs to be underlined. It seems to me.
Fact.
Interesting. Okay. I think we have just a few minutes left. Is that right, Paige?
Yes, 2.5.
2.5. Okay. Any other points? Yeah, Hermes.
Yeah, I would like to mention also that we wanted to help the community to buy a house like the 200 Linden building. They have 19 units. It'd be great to have another one like that. So residents of the working city have the opportunity to own apartment financial.
You're kind of cutting out, but I think what I heard you say is just making sure that there's support for down payments, so that low and lowest income families can enter the housing market. Is that right?
But to have, yeah, that's correct. But to have another, I don't know if the city has another project for housing for sale. I think that's the only one so far. I don't know if somebody knows that it's another one coming. But we need to have that option as well.
So I would say that the city does partner with a nonprofit organization called Heart of San Mateo County, which was mentioned earlier, where it helps individuals living or working in South San Francisco to obtain first-time home buyers loans. And I know that because I'm a recipient of that. There was no way I could afford a house if it wasn't for a nonprofit like Heart that helped me become a first-time home buyer. I know that we're a participant with them, and I know that there's been several South San Francisco residents, regardless if it's a single-family home or if it's one of those new developments, that have participated in Heart to allow them to get a first-time home buyer.
That's great. I think we just have a few seconds left, and then we're gonna. Oh, I think we might be going back to the larger group. Is that right?
30 seconds.
Okay. And I see, Christy, your hand is up. What we're going to do is take public comment in the public comment section of the agenda. So that's coming right up. And small group, I'll ask you to help me report out, and hopefully, Paige, you can maybe share our screens, and then others can look at the screen as well. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right, are we back? We're a little short on time, but maybe what we could do is a very brief small group report out, and then we definitely want to have time to hear from the public and then have a commissioner discussion. Let's see. So Paige, if you share our slides, I thought some great comments were made. And maybe other groups identified similar ideas, but actually, could you go to the other slide first that we talked about with, oh, this was the first one. So engaging Old Town residents, one of the ideas that came up was thinking about how to target specific populations within the city, neighborhoods, for example, in the Community Resource Center, the support center, which I think has already been discussed. We heard at the commission, at the city council, among city council members, so that there's an opportunity for neighborhood specific issues to be addressed and community members to connect at that resource center. And then also perhaps using public transport, buses, to make sure that folks feel like they can reach the new support center. And then also an idea of having maybe like live Facebook 2-minute educational videos as a way of sharing information and news. I might just, okay, and then so for making sure to reach priority populations and that folks are able to access programs and services that we heard about, in addition to everything that's already happening, maximizing the schools where COVID testing is, public transportation stops and buses, also with local organizations in communities, and making sure that landlords know their legal obligations and tenant rights. And then lastly, we talked quite a lot about the new opportunity that is going to have kind of take place with the promotores and community navigator programs to build trust and make sure that people are able to access services. Maybe I'll pause there, go back maybe Paige, and see if anyone, was there additional ideas in terms of making sure that populations, the key populations, priority populations are reached through the programs and services that we discussed? Any additional ideas that came out?
Well, do you want me to just give you kind of a snapshot of what we had?
That'd be great, thanks.
Yeah, and Lisa, please, jump in if there's something I'm forgetting. It's having the right people in the room, looking to trusted sources like churches, like nonprofits, and entities that already have the public trust. There was a mention and a call out of the children of seniors not being able to buy or remain in South San Francisco because of the lack of affordable housing and how that's disruptive to families. One thing about all of the programs in terms of the racial and social equity lens is accountability. To have some mechanism so that it will be known whether or not these things are working. Childcare should always be a consideration in terms of reaching out to populations and making sure that barriers are not there. Using community colleges as also trusted hubs. They have sort of what I call a baked in targeted communities that are very diverse. And for the programs to be South San Francisco specific and mindful of the cultures that are actually in the city, so that they are relational to the people who are there. And as always, language, not as translations as a subset, but translations as a first tier experience. And just, the assumption that yes, this will be translated, not as an also ran. And accessibility of meeting places, whether or not people have to be there physically, or they can actually use the internet or smartphones to make sure that those options are alive and well. So with that, Lisa, did I miss anything?
I think that was an excellent summary.
Thanks.
Thank you, Myra. Nayeli, did you have anything else that your group discussed on this particular question?
Yeah, well, I think that, and again, my group with Commissioner Vanessa McGovern, Bobby Vaughn, Jeff Azzopardi, and Pat Murray. So please feel free to chime in if I miss anything. But again, we spent a bit of time discussing advertising. So thinking about where priority populations go when people are in distress and housing insecure. And we talked about the value of visual advertisements on bus, on radio, and radio multilingual reach. And also spent some time thinking about, using the example of how the COVID vaccine outreach is getting the word out, using brick and mortar, like using flyers, not only relying on new media, on social media, but sort of quote unquote old school ways of creating connections and building relationships. Another way or strategy was thinking about community resource centers and engaging with school districts to reach the parents in priority neighborhoods, prioritizing neighborhoods. Just go where people are, partner with, for instance, providers who are working with communities accessing public benefits to make sure that people who most need the support get it. I think the only other two pieces was, again, reinforcing the partnership with the school district to pass out flyers and information, and working with boys and girls clubs as well to reach families.
Thank you so much. Great summaries. So we also just wanted to take a minute to talk about, for both strategies, we focused on particularly leveraging available land assets in our conversation. And the group, I think, made it an important point of making sure that we use clear language about what is affordable housing, breaking down to, what is really an AMI refer to, specifically with low and lowest income, to make sure that's clear. And one way I heard someone mention accountability, we were talking about using data to collect and track demographics specifically, to make sure that we know who is participating in the programs, and that, in fact, that the priority populations that we're intending to reach are being reached and participating, and that you can do through tracking demographics. And then also making sure that the units for low and lowest income households are built, and again, holding city developers accountable. How do we do that? Do we incentivize them? Do we penalize them? Do we call them out? It's tricky because we have important goals, but really want to make sure that they're reached. And if they're not, what happens? And then also the group talked a lot about when nonprofits are involved, then they're not as focused on profit margins, which then allows for more low and lowest income to be housing to be developed for low and lowest income folks. And then finally, just the importance of support for down payments to get into the market. So maybe I'll pause there and see, Nayeli, did you want to add anything from your group?
Yeah, I think that our group's discussion, centered around, thinking through, race and geography. So going to areas and neighborhoods for strategy 3.2, specifically going to areas and neighborhoods where people of color live, doing that targeted outreach and being explicit in outreach materials about the priority populations to ensure that people know that those services are intended to serve them. One interesting idea that came up as well is, someone asked a question about whether there is a city newsletter or a publication that everyone in South San Francisco gets. And we talked about the quarterly newsletter and the activity guide for Parks and Rec. And so there are between 4 and 6 publications that are mailed to all residential addresses per year. So thinking about that as an opportunity to get information out. In terms of, thinking through considerations for strategy 4.1, the two points we covered where the city just needs to continue to push for available affordable housing, which is really challenging in the area. And taking a look at income limits as eligibility for affordable housing continues to be tailored to single earners and not families.
Interesting. Thank you. And Myra, what would your group like to add to this conversation?
Well, I actually did both of them at the same time because I thought we were on a time crunch. So all of what I said earlier applied to both.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, perfect. And we are.
Okay.
So with that, thank you. Let's open it up to the public. I know there was a couple of folks in our small group that wanted to ask a question. And so let's see if we have a hand. Now is the time. Do we have any community members that would like to ask a question? It looks like Sarah Funes. What we'll do is you have 2 minutes to ask your question. And Paige, I think, is going to time it now. So Paige, do you want to let us know?
Sorry, just giving Sarah a chance to unmute and.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
We can. Welcome, Sarah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so it's Funes, actually, like Kung Fu and Nessie the Loch Ness Monster. So yeah, I had a question. It's a comment, but also a question. So I wanted to, like, in my group, we talked a lot about how a lot of people in our community can't afford to live here anymore. And a huge part of that are student loans. And I unfortunately didn't see that mentioned at all in this presentation. So like my comment would be that we possibly look into how many people in this city have student loans and what effect it's having on the community, because it affects every single generation of Americans at this point. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. I don't know if there's, let's see, if anyone wants to answer that question. I don't know if Nell.
And it, especially seeing as how it's such an economic issue, since women of color get paid disproportionately less. So it's harder for us to pay back our student loans.
Thank you very much.
As a fellow student loan holder, I understand the pain. So yeah, that's a great comment, and one we hadn't, I has never been posed in at least in my 3.5 years with the city. So happy to think about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see. It looks like AS Paige has their hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I think AS, you're raising and lowering your hand, and I'm trying to unmute you, but so you're jumping around. Hold on one sec. Let's find you again. A long list of. There you go. Okay, AS, you should be able to unmute now.
Oh, sorry. This is Olga Perez. I think everyone knows who AS is by now. So in our group, there was discussion about housing in the Old Town area, and I'm just really concerned about overbuilding in this area without taking into consideration the service needs of residents. We can't ignore the fact that the area lacks services and opportunities, especially for youth and for their success. I know I keep going back to this tragedy, back in 2010, which is the community is still very numb about it. And the root of the problem that led to this tragedy is because of the lack of services and resources, especially for youth and of all ages, including seniors. So when it comes to housing, I'm just very concerned about one area being overbuilt without taking consideration the service needs of the areas. When real estate agents say location, 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 and just like distributing the wealth, for example, like the high-rise buildings, the only ones who are benefiting from the wealth are the developers. And come to find out, in the Cadence, the building, there were 0 affordable units at the Cadence building. So that's just my concern about that. Distributing the housing, and who's to say, not every Old Town resident wishes to continue to live in Old Town. They want to be able to live in other areas of South San Francisco. And I think housing should be met in for all South San Francisco residents, not only for the Old Town neighborhood residents. And in terms of outreach, my family and I, we know what it's like distributing flyers, and that works the old-fashioned way. But come rain season and with the heat, I really stress the community center and to have someone that we could identify with, someone that looks like us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So definitely a number of themes that you raised that we'll take into close consideration. Thank you so much. Other hands from the community?
Not seeing anybody else, so
No?
just give it a few seconds. But
so in that case, I think we'll invite the commissioners to make any final comments on this conversation. Hi, Gladys.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand today.
That works.
But it's more of a question. Maybe this is something that it was said, but I don't think I heard it. How do you guarantee that all these programs that are talked about are for the residents of South San Francisco? We know the housing crisis is not only a South San Francisco problem, it's all Bay Area. So how do you guarantee that it's getting to the right people?
So maybe going back to the idea that we heard from another commissioner, Kayla, I think you brought up tracking demographics might be one way to make sure that you could identify who's participating in the programs and also getting the housing, it sounds like, making sure. Other comments from commissioners?
I can jump in really quickly. It's so this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about housing. I know that the council has a special study session on housing, and so that's I just wanted to invite other commissioners who are interested in this conversation if they want to participate and listen and see what our thoughts are and how we can tackle this issue. Mike, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but or Flora, if you have it in front of you.
Right. It's this coming Tuesday at 6 p.m. So I believe that's the 28th. 28th, thank you, of April at 6 p.m. And absolutely, we'll be doing a deep dive on affordable housing with the council and discussing a lot of the same issues tonight. So we actually postponed that session with the council so that we could have this meeting with the commission first and benefit from your comments.
Just wanted to make sure that we got the correct date. It's Tuesday, April 27th. The 28th is a regular council meeting. Stay tuned for both, but the 27th is the housing conversation.
Thank you. No, it's correct on the last slide, but sorry about that.
That's why I looked at my calendar. I get confused too. I thought.
Okay, we've clarified that. Yes. Future conversations. Did I see your hand go up, Commissioner Edith?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up with Commissioner Gladys. She did mention about how are we tracking and how do we know that it goes to the residents in South San Francisco, but also thinking about how is it promoted, right? I think a lot of the things that I see are either emails. Now I did receive something in the mail that, for the free laptops and Wi-Fi, which was hotspots, which was, I kind of like that idea where you reach more people, but again, going back into like just affordable housing and the opportunities of this new developments, how is that really being made known to other people in South San Francisco other than using technology would be a very important thing to keep in mind, really.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard in our small group was, again, making sure that the promotores and community navigators have this information in order to be able to explain it in local communities with in some of the places that we had heard faith-based organizations or nonprofits or schools and things like that. So I think there's a lot of really great opportunities with the Promotores and Community Navigator program from what I can tell. Yeah, hi, Mark.
Right, a question for Nell. So I know that we as a city are promoting live, work individuals, families that live or work in South San Francisco.
Preference.
Yeah, preference in terms of new developments. So I just wanted to mention that. But in terms of tracking, for those who apply, because someone mentioned it, it's been kind of mentioned here a couple times, are we allowed within fair housing rules to track that data?
The question is, can we track those that apply so that we know who we're reaching? Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay. I mean, I think, you know, and we have that available. Mm-hmm. You know, I think once, you know, our next update to council on sort of recent affordable housing transactions will definitely be the sale of the units at 200 Linden. So that's 19 below market rate for sale units. For sale is a little bit different, right? Because typically you need to be engaged in the for sale market and you're looking on Redfin or Zillow or, you know, any of these tools. And so that's an easy way for us to get the word out about those units. But we do have lots of data on who applied and then who will end up owning those units that we can absolutely aggregate and share with council. I don't see why not.
Okay. And it's not like council has a decision who gets these units. So I just wanted to clarify on that. It's not, council's not the one that's making the decision who gets these units. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very far removed and through a lottery.
Yeah. Any other final commissioner comments for today, knowing that there's the study session next week and future conversations to have, but I think this has been in a very rich, deep conversation in terms of ideas to answer the questions that I know, Nell, you had, you know, just to consider the best ways to reach people with the range of programs and services. So lots of great ideas. Commissioner Hermes, you had a comment.
Is it possible to consider to make banners Grand Avenue on Linden, like to promote the community support center, for example, you know, to be flashy in the main two, in the two main avenues.
I didn't catch the comment. So
we have on Grand Avenue on Linden, the city changed the banners and so what is happening right next to the light poles. If we could use that as when we to promote the community support center.
Yeah,
I see. Yeah.
Change out the banners to reflect the community support center when it opens. Yeah, absolutely. A visual reminder. It's right there. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I think with that, I know if there's anything else that you want to ask, definitely keep it in mind for the future conversations. But for tonight, I think what I'd like to do is invite Commissioner Pat Murray to give us an update on the South San Francisco Unified School District efforts. And again, just wanted to thank Eric and Nell for all of your hard work in not just today, every day, but in particular your presentations, and they were great. So with that, Commissioner Pat.
Yeah, I think you asked specifically what our direction was what the board direction was regarding the South San Francisco Police Department SLO program, and it's still unfolding, but the direction was to negotiate an agreement to see if the district can continue a relationship with the SSF PD with very clear parameters, probably an MOU. Some of the things that were discussed are non-uniform to the extent possible, not handcuffing students in public places, contacting parents first. And then the second part of the direction was to move forward with the development of an equity task force to explore larger systemic racism that exists within district practices, policies, and curriculum. And we have moved forward with that. We started this task force before the pandemic, and it kind of slowed down, but the superintendent has reached out to the people that she was talking to before, a task force made up of teachers, staff members, parents, community members, and so she's working on that. She and her staff are working on that right now. We also talked about a new mission statement, an equity statement. We also talked about hiring at some point in time a director of equity and inclusion as well. So those are some of the things that we're working on. That was our direction to the superintendent.
Thank you very much for that update. It sounds like a number of different approaches there that are still unfolding.
I'm sorry, can I say one other thing? I misreported to the commission that ethnic studies is a requirement for graduation. We were going over our policies and at our last meeting, and there were a couple of us who thought that that was a requirement of graduation. And apparently it is not. So we are moving forward with that. Hopefully that will be a policy next year, not for this year, but it's something that we all would like to see happen.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any other final questions or comments from commissioners? I think then Paige, if you could, oh yeah, Commissioner Edith.
Just really quick before Commissioner Pat, I wanted to ask if there's any talking about the possibility of having, just like you're changing this policy about the graduation requirements, thinking about the A through G requirements, which are the ones that put you in the track and the pathway for, a four-year university versus what the district has right now is graduating from high school with just enough credits to graduate, but not necessarily the classes that put you in the track to go to a four-year college. So other districts do that as a district. Their requirements are aligned with the A through G requirements so that any student who graduates will be, if they decide to go to a school, a four-year. Is there any talks about like the possibilities in the future to do that also as a change of policies?
That should be our policy, actually, is that we want all of our students to have completed the A through G requirements for college.
Yeah, to graduate from your high schools is not right now. It's not a policy. Students can graduate without the A through G, as long as you have the classes that are put into the graduation requirements in high school.
I'll send you our new policy that we just approved the other day. I mean, at the last meeting. And if anybody wants any more information about the sports that we provide our students with in terms of when they're the discipline supports and mental health supports, I have a list of things that that Ryan Siebers, our director, who's in charge of safety, has provided me with. So I can provide that for all of you as well.
Thank you. And then Paige, do you want to show the last slide just so that we're letting folks know the next steps? Wow, I think we're into phase 3 officially starting in about 2 minutes. So just wanted to again reiterate the invitation to the Let's Talk Housing conversations, and that information is here starting tomorrow. And then the City Council session that we mentioned is April 27th. So lots of conversations happening this month. And then in terms of the Commission on Racial and Social Equity, next month in May, we'll be giving you an update on the remaining strategies that we've already discussed, but want to make sure that you're updated on the latest steps in those areas. We'll also be bringing forward some initial thinking about the final report. We're going to be starting on writing that up also in about 2 minutes. So wanted to present to you some of the implementation ideas that have come from these conversations and meetings. And then in June, we'll be reviewing a draft report, some of the components of the draft report. And then the final report is going to be available in July, according to our plan. So lots of work to continue to do, but all of it is essentially built out of these meetings. And so we're taking your thinking, your priorities, and putting them into that report and action. And so we have 1 more minute if anyone has a final thought for the afternoon, but I just want to take in everyone. It's very, very nice to see your faces and have you here this afternoon working on this all together.
So I reiterate our thanks to Eric and Nell for spending some time with us and sharing the housing elements and the programs that we have regarding housing. I also thank the public who joined us, and of course our usual commissioners who are here. Thank you very much for your participation. And if there's no objection, meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.
Have a great evening,
meeting, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Thank you, Maria.